We're not amazed at how good Paul McCartney is. And in this episode, we're going to introduce you to his best solo effort, Flaming Pie, co-produced by... Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Oh, I love this job.
I should say so. Yeah, I do.
It's not really a job, but...
No.
I love what we do. I really do.
It's been great. It's fantastic.
So much fun.
Yeah, it is.
We
picked a winner. And we picked another winner, another nugget.
Yeah, another nugget. But and you know what? There's a whole bunch of other nuggets to go mining for. So get your miner's hat with the light on and get your pickaxe. Because there's a whole bunch of other content for you to go through on our 3324.buzzsprout.com. Or you can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple, you can go to Pandora, Google, anywhere that there's a podcast, we're there. We have inserted ourselves, whether we were invited or not. Mm-hmm. We are on these major podcast providers. So you can find us wherever you get your podcast. And if you're listening to us now, that means you already know that. So it's actually kind of redundant for me to say that, no?
No, I don't think so. Right.
That's like if you and I went on vacation, we got to our destination and I said, we're here. We're here. Like that would be redundant too, because obviously you see us pulling up and we're here.
Well,
so.
Yeah, but there's always that one in the crowd that's like, what?
Wasn't paying attention.
Wasn't paying attention. Where are we?
Sleeping in the back.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
I don't know how you can sleepwalk finding a podcast, but if you did and you happen to swipe on us, stay for a little while. Check us out. Yep. See if you like it. And if not, that's okay. Share it. Share it with your friends. You want to hear a funny story?
I do.
Today I went to, they're not a sponsor, but I went to Dunkin' Donuts to get an iced coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up to the drive-thru to pick up my order. And the young gentleman said, I got a free coffee, so he scanned my phone to get the, activate the free coffee superpower. And then he's like, what are you doing tonight? Because tonight is, we're recording this on Halloween night, whenever it comes out.
Happy Halloween, by the way.
Happy Halloween. And he's like, what are you doing tonight? I said, actually, I'm recording a podcast tonight. I'm not doing, oh my God. He's like, oh my God, what? Like he was like super impressed. Little does he know. So I'm like, well, he's like, what's it about? I'm like, it's about, we do like, mostly classic rock and movies and stuff. He's like, oh my God. So I keep some of our magnets. We actually have magnets for your car. I keep some of the magnets in my glove compartment.
Mm-hmm.
So I pulled out the magnet and I gave him a magnet and he was so excited. He went on Snapchat and he made a post on Snapchat while he was at work with our magnet, like kind of putting the word out. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Hey man, that's great. That's a great story.
He didn't ask for an autograph though. And I got the coffee for free, but that's because I had enough points. He didn't give it to me for free. He wasn't
not because of the podcast, right?
He's like, you're right, sir. I am a little more impressed with you.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
So that's a neat little story. So, and I got rid of one of our magnets too. So that was kind of cool too. So I've had those for a while. So I was like, yeah.
Sitting on the swag.
Put it on the outside of the drive-thru. Like stick it to the outside of the drive-thru. Free advertising. Right. I said, if I do it, you guys will never let me come back again. But if you do it, it's different. So, because I'm not defacing the place. So, anyway, we got some business to talk about today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paul McCartney. We've done the Beatles. We've done a couple of the Beatles. We've done Sgt. Pepper, Rubber Soul. We did Get Back, the Disney Plus special.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to finally talk about one of his solo albums and what I think is his probably his finest work. He's done a lot. I mean, I'm going to roll through the stats, and this could take a while. So if you're at home, you could take a couple of sips of coffee while we go through this, because there's going to be a lot for this one. But you know what? He deserves it. So let's talk about the album is called Flaming Pie. Where did that title come from? Oddly enough, or amazingly enough, it came from John Lennon. Back in the day, John Lennon stated that he had a dream that a man on a flaming pie came to him and said, "You will be known as the Beatles with an A, not Beatles like the insect." He goes, "From here on in, you'll be known as Beatles with an A." And Paul McCartney remembered that conversation and that dream that John Lennon had, and named this effort Flaming Pie, which is really great. So this was released in May of 1997, produced by Paul McCartney all around. Jeff Lynne did 8 tracks, and then George Martin worked on 2 tracks as producer, but then did some arranging. There was only one single released in the US, The World Tonight. Hit a whopping number 64. Didn't really do much, but it hit number 2 on the Billboard charts. Did very well. Certified gold, so not platinum. So it's gold is over 500,000, but less than a mil.
Yeah.
So in the world of the albums we talk about, not gangbusters, but doesn't make a difference with this one. He's been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. First with the Beatles in '88. I think that was the second year of the Hall of Fame. First year of the Hall of Fame, all the pioneers got in. And then second year Beatles, etc. And then he got in as a solo artist in 1999. He has written or co-written 32 number 1 singles. Okay. He's got an Academy Award. He's got a Primetime Emmy Award. He has 18 Grammy Awards, 9 with the Beatles, 6 solo, 2 with Wings, and 1 as part of a collaboration. And he was knighted in 1997. So he became Sir Paul. He is a Guinness Book World Record holder as the most honored composer and performer in music. With his solo album, McCartney 3, which came out in 2020, he became the first artist to have a new album in one of the top 2 chart positions in each of the last 6 decades.
That's amazing. Yeah. Legacy. Okay. That's quite the legacy. Yep.
And that's not counting the Beatles. That was just with his solo work. So starting in the 70s, he is the first artist to have a new album in one of the either number 1 or number 2 chart position in each of the last 6 decades.
That's amazing.
That's unreal.
Fantastic. Yeah.
That is the let's get it out of the way. A lot of people, when you talk about the Beatles, you can talk about your favorite one, but there is no disputing that Paul McCartney was literally built in a laboratory to make music.
Yeah, no doubt.
And especially after watching when we watched when we did the Get Back episode, it really came to the forefront. A lot of that footage is him just sitting there at the piano, just rolling shit off.
And just creating a song.
Creating a song, coming off with lyrics and throwaway stuff that would then be on Abbey Road or whatever. He writes love songs but he writes great love songs. That's not easy to do. It's easy to write a sappy song, but he can do both. He can do hard stuff and he can do very tender stuff and meaningful stuff. He's just an amazing artist. I mean, he's probably the best artist of the 20th century easily.
Yeah.
I think you can make the case for that, right?
Sure. And it's an interesting. This album is. I look at this album as a very strong case for that. Even though somebody might listen to this and think, what's the big deal? But there's something to be said about this record, and we'll get into it, of course. You mentioned Flaming Pie and the John Lennon anecdote, but it's interesting to note that this was right on the heels of the Anthology. Yeah, that came out during the mid '90s, and took 2-3 years to get all that out, to get all of the other material out, the CDs that came with it, all the unreleased material that they unearthed for this massive project. Yeah. Jeff Lynne, of course, producing the Beatles, the 2 tracks for that were brand new. They were.
Free as a Bird and Real Love.
Free as Real Love. And they were John Lennon tunes that were just, old demos that they, I remember the day that I heard that original demo, of Free as a Bird on classic rock radio. And it was like, how are they going to do this? And it was announced that Jeff Lynne was going to work with the Beatles at this, because he had been working with George Harrison up to this point with the Wilburys. And so, so I think this is a kind of a I would call this album more of sort of an epilogue to the whole affair.
In a lot of ways, it's absolutely an epilogue on a couple of fronts.
Yeah.
So just to circle back on the anthology, yeah, you're right. They had to do all the interviews with the three remaining Beatles together.
Mm-hmm.
George, Paul, and Ringo. So they had to film all that, hours of footage of reminiscing and storytelling and all that. Then, yeah, compiling the unreleased stuff, then working on 2 new songs together.
Mm-hmm.
While that was going on, Paul McCartney wanted to put out a solo album, and EMI's like, no, you can't. What, and I think in the beginning, Paul McCartney was a little miffed, and then he thought about it. He goes, yeah, why would I want to go against the Beatles anyway?
That's true.
Right? It's going to get lost in the wash, and then, the Jeff, and then we could call it like the Jeff Lynne problem. Is
Mm-hmm.
that when the anthology was coming together, George Harrison says, well, I want Jeff Lynne to work on this kind of stuff. And Paul McCartney was thinking, well, this is George's friend, so he's going to be slanted towards George, right? And he's going to take George's side with stuff. So there was a little trepidation from the anthology part of what was Jeff Lynne going to do, or how was he going to act, or how was he going to be. But like I said, the guy, you've heard it here. If you've heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times. He's the most humble guy. He was there to work. This is like wish fulfillment for him. This guy's got the life of Walter Mitty. I mean, he's working with all of his heroes. Yeah. I don't know what else the guy can ask for. So he proved by what, like you had said, the work he had done on Free as a Bird, which there is some, there's some clips on YouTube, which maybe we'll post on our Facebook page about how it was a mixture of science and witchcraft and magic.
Mm-hmm.
Of matching this up and getting it done, and Jeff Lynne explains a little bit of it. Paul McCartney explains a little bit of it. Tom Petty explains a little bit of it in assorted interviews about those sessions. That reinvigorated and energized Paul McCartney. So this was a good, the anthology was a good thing because his last couple of albums were lackluster. I mean, they were great albums, but they weren't charting very well.
Mm-hmm.
His last album of the 80s, Flowers in the Dirt, was his great comeback. We saw him on that tour.
That's right.
Which is absolutely amazing. And it hit like number, I don't know, like 21 on the charts. It was okay. It was a big comeback. And then a couple of years later, his first album of the 90s, Off the Ground, which was a great album, it only hit number 17.
Mm.
So he's kind of like, almost like the bloom is coming off the rose. He's, is he going to become one of those artists that kind of becomes a legacy act? And after doing the anthology, he's like, I need to get back to the quality and the standards that the Beatles had set. And that's, so he grabs Jeff Lynne and says, listen, I want to, record at a high level, or sometimes I want to do stuff quick like the Beatles did. I want to be able to, get together and be focused and knock out a really good song. And Jeff Lynne's like, yeah, I'm game for that. Like, whatever you want to do.
But that's an interesting point though, because to me, it's like, that was one of the questions I wanted to raise is why Paul McCartney why would he need Jeff Lynne to co-produce? Like he can do it himself, like that's the thing. And the most interesting thing, one of the interesting things about the album is like, if you take the amount of songs that Jeff Lynne appeared on, half of them sound like the signature Jeff Lynne producing.
You think so?
Style.
I was going to make the opposite
definitely.
case.
But then there are other songs that sound nothing like, but he's still playing on them, prolifically. There's backing vocals, there's guitar, whatever. Songs like Heaven on a Sunday, for example, that to me is like evocative of a Wings tune, but Jeff Lynne's a part of that. And this is the first time that I ever heard Jeff Lynne ever be part of something that didn't have that certain something that he does in his production style. Yeah, that it just
that's what I was getting to.
Like it. Yeah.
And that's part of the epilogue. Is this would end his 90s run of production.
Mm-hmm.
After this, he would go dormant for a while. He really didn't produce anything. We've talked in previous episodes about the extent of his work in the late 80s, I think on the Wilburys episode.
Yeah.
His extent of his work on the late 80s and early 90s, and how much stuff he had done. And this kind of caps it off. And like you said, and for me, I felt that this was his most on Jeff Lynne-like production work, and probably because of the work he did with the Beatles. I think McCartney got him because he knows that this guy's a craftsman, can kind of help because McCartney's the producer on all tracks, and then there's Jeff Lynne and George Martin on other ones. And I think Jeff Lynne was kept around for his talents of what he can achieve, and how he's you can bounce ideas off him, because McCartney doesn't need anybody. He self-produces, he writes, he's a self-contained thing. He plays everything. He doesn't need people. But so the fact that he sought somebody out, I think he wanted that spark of collaboration that the Beatles had.
Sure.
Right. Which is different than when you're working by yourself. He was energized coming off that. So he was probably really jazzed about about the sessions for Free as a Bird and Real Love. It was kind of like, oh wow, here's that, not necessarily a group dynamic, but that collaboration dynamic. Yeah. So let me grab him because he did such a great job, that I can use, let me see what he can bring to this. And between that and Steve Miller, because you can't discount Steve Miller on this album too, who was an old friend of his, Steve Miller from Steve Miller Band. We talked about him. We talked about McCartney briefly in our Book of Dreams episode. They were buddies from way back. And then Steve Miller, comes on 3 songs and lends a different, the little harder, oh my God, it used to be bad. Just, you just hear it. I love Steve Miller's voice because it's it's like soft sound. It's not like, it's like the anti-Bob Seger, right? They're two guys that kind of came up at the same time. They're both popular in the 70s and had a lot of hits. And Bob Seger has like a growl and a grit to his voice. And Steve Miller is his voice is more rounded. It's got like softer, it's like rounded edges, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when he comes in on Used to Be Bad on this album, he sounds just like Steve Miller from the 70s, and it's just like a great, like, it almost like they transported him from 77 and brought him in. He just sounded so great on this album. And then his guitar work, he worked on 3 songs, Used to Be Bad. He did the guitar on If You Wanna. And then he also helped out on Young Boy. So,
that's my favorite.
Bringing a little bit of a harder edge to those songs, which is just, it gives the album such a nice balance between the harder edged, the ballad stuff that McCartney does, which is fantastic. I mean, if you hate his ballads, I would challenge you to listen to this album and listen to the words. There's some sadness associated with this album. Linda McCartney had been diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years earlier. Yep. Which had metastasized into her liver, which means it was spreading, and they had caught it too late. Yeah. And they knew back then that she only had about 18 months to live. So there is some,
there's that weight there. Yeah.
Yeah. If you listen to that album with those ears, it takes on a different tone. Some of the songs, and then Little Willow was written about Ringo's first wife, his ex-wife, Maureen, who passed away. And that was written for his children. So there's like loss, there's impending loss. Linda would pass away the following year in 1998. So there's like it's not that there's a heaviness on the album, because it doesn't sound like that, but in that context, he's working through this stuff. And when you hear even Calico Skies, which was actually written about Hurricane Bob in 1991, but it doesn't feel, Souvenir, these songs
all these songs are kind of woven into the whole, like you say, the collaborative spark, the creative spark that appeared, I'm sure listening to all that tons of material like the Beatles did back in the day had to have had some kind of an effect on all of them. It's just at that point. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it just the slower songs, the sadder songs. Great Day is probably one of my favorite tracks, and it's pretty upbeat, but it pretty much says what it has to say. It closes the album out and it ends on a positive note, but it is acknowledging that she doesn't have long. And that song was written in 92. Like that was an older song.
Before that, Great Day is 25 years old.
Yeah. Well,
he recorded. It went unrecorded. He recorded a demo that was never released, and he recorded it as it was exactly arranged.
Okay, I thought it was for Off the Ground from the sessions.
No, there was some other stuff on here. There was a lot of other stuff that was kind of like kicking around.
Okay.
And that's what McCartney did. Is McCartney gave Jeff Lynne a tape of 10 demos and said, pick 3. So Jeff Lynne picked a couple. So yeah, great days. But the very first song song we were singing is about the Beatles. It's about those old times.
Yeah.
You know, when they were having these big thoughts and sitting around and smoking and just talking about life, right? And so this is a reflective and introspective album that you're getting from him, but it's not sappy, you know, because then you get the only single is the second song in the US, which is the world tonight, which is up tempo. It's great. It's got one of my favorite lyrics of all time. I go back so far, I'm in front of me, which I love that. It's so like, you know, he goes back so far around the world that he ends up in front of himself, which is just like, again, he still writes great lyrics. You know, these are not like throwaways and a guy just kind of, you know, trying to get through this kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Which I really, you have to respect about the man is he's prolific, and it's still good stuff.
Yeah, it is. And it's an eclectic mix. Like you mentioned, the Steve Miller stuff evokes that stuff. Like, you know, he talks about it's reminiscent of the Beatles, but it's setting it in that sort of style of an older song, an older tune, almost like a pub type of tavern type of song where people are like kind of, you know, drinking, and it's like the song we were singing, and it's like in 3/4 time, and it has that sort of waltzy kind of thing, and you know, and then you have like the stuff with Steve Miller, which is very 70s, evocative of that period, and so that, you know, he's acknowledging all the great moments, I think, of
kind of like a travelogue, kind of like a travelogue of his career in a weird way.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah,
you know, it's not throwbacky, except for Beautiful Night. Really has a lot of DNA from a lot of different Paul McCartney eras. But like you said, Heaven on a Sunday is just like a mellow. That's got his son James playing electric guitar.
Yeah, some nice work.
You know, his son was only like 19 at the time, hanging around the studio, noodling on guitar, not really doing something. Then his father, Paul. I mean, can you imagine your father's Paul McCartney says, "Hey, do you want to play guitar on this song?" Like, okay, let me go have a heart attack. Like, no pressure.
It's either that or what? You want me to play with you, old man? Come on now. No.
But like, you know, like I'd be like, and he's like, yeah, I'll do it. You know, so it wasn't like a big rehearsed thing, and he came in and did some nice work on Heaven on a Sunday. Really,
work. It's a beautiful song. It's breezy. I love it. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. It's just some
and like you said, I think on Flaming Pie is probably the most ELO-ish you get.
Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, with Jeff Lynne. Yeah. Like I think the rest of the stuff is very understated.
You get that piano that kicks in, that dun dun dun, you know, that's so,
and even the backing vocals, like that. and even like the dun 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 dun, like that kind of stuff has that trademark on it. But it's nice to hear it from McCartney. Like it kind of works. He's a nice foil for McCartney,
right?
To kind of bring some of those great ideas into him. So yeah, I remember when I first heard this album, I was just smiling when I first heard it. Let me tell you the story about the vinyl. This is a very rare vinyl album, right? Because in '97 they were pretty much done. Records weren't being made anymore. Like that was over. It was over. So when I got back into vinyl, I wrote like a list, and like Flaming Pie was on the list, and I wasn't even sure if it was out on vinyl. And I'd go on Discogs, which if you're a vinyl collector or if you have a record collection, you can go on Discogs and create a free account. They're not sponsored. You can actually catalog your collection. And if you have the mobile app, you just scan the barcode, it adds it to your collection. Anyway, and it's got a marketplace. I was looking, Flaming Pie is like $150 for the vinyl. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a grail, right? This is a grail vinyl because I'm not going to just find it. You know, a rare album like that is just not going to be sitting in a record store. I'm going to have to get it from somewhere.
To be clear, this is before the archive collection when you know all the remastered albums that he went back and remastered. This is
this is the original, which I always do. I don't like to get, if I can avoid it, I don't like to get re-releases. I did have to get that for Full Moon Fever. I could not find a copy of the original Full Moon Fever. So when that came out, I bought it, and then I actually did find a copy, and I got it really cheap. But going back to McCartney's, it was so expensive that it's just not going to be, you're not going to find it in the dollar bin by mistake. Like, ooh, how did this get here?
Yeah.
Lo and behold, I found it in a record store. I was up in the Berkshires, which is northern. Western Massachusetts on the border of New York State. So it's a really beautiful area. It's just like very scenic and picturesque. In the fall, you go there, you have a good time. This little crappy hole in the wall record store that had like the junkiest junk. So I'm flipping through. Like when I go to record stores, I just look in certain things just to see. Like I'll look in Fleetwood Mac, see if there's something I never saw. I'll check a couple of different artists. So I'm flipping through, looking down, flipping through, and then I look up, at the windowsill, and the album is sitting right there, like Flaming Pie sitting on the windowsill.
That's amazing.
Very strange.
But, hey, if you're gonna find it somewhere, it's got to be in one of those holes in the wall.
Yeah, it wasn't even behind the counter though. So I grabbed it. I brought it up to the counter. I said, "Hold this." I said, "I'm going to keep." Now I'm really going to start looking. If you guys have Flaming Pie in this little hole in the wall, tiny record shop,
how much did you start looking?
And they didn't even have it behind the counter. It was $100.
$100?
Yeah, which wasn't bad. It still goes for more than that. Even with the re-release, like the original. I want the original. I want because they were mastered differently for LP than they do it now. And we do it from the original analogs. Not always. Even that's turned out to not always be true. So, so I got Flaming Pie on vinyl. So I was just a little off road, but very related to.
And I take it that it's in good condition. Sounds
it's in
great.
Beautiful condition. I don't pull it out. Yeah, I don't even think I listened to it for this episode. I don't think I don't pull it out. I don't take it out very often. It's kind of like
you got to savor it. Yeah.
Because it's only, only a certain amount of plays before it's going to start to, to break down. So that's got to be, it's going to be a great one. But it's just a really, plus it, it came out in 97, which was a different time. And, we're talking 25 years ago, right? Different time in our lives as well. Yeah. Attaching this to different things that were going on personally, a lot of great stuff.
Lots of baggage there. Lots of personal stuff happening.
Yeah. So this was just it was kind of there. And in the middle 90s, you didn't have these types of artists. Grunge was kind of, on the decay a little bit. The alt pop was kind of coming up. But these kind of legacy artists were lost in the sauce. There really wasn't, ELO was dormant, if you want to put it that way. Fleetwood Mac had just come out with The Dance, but that was a live thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that I was listening to was veering off into finding new music or finding different, singles that I liked, So for him to come out with this and be such a great release. Again, not that I wasn't a fan of Off the Ground and Flowers in the Dirt, and even Press to Play I like, which a lot of people don't like. Press to Play, I think that's one of his better solo albums, and a lot of people don't like it.
I like them all.
Which has a lot of great stuff on it.
Yeah.
So Beautiful Night is it your favorite song or no?
No, it is. Really? I acknowledge that it's probably the most.
You acknowledge?
I acknowledge that it is probably the lushest song on the record. It has a lot of production on there. It is a gorgeous, and if there's anything that it evokes the Beatles, it's that one. But it's but there are other tracks that I just like Heaven on a Sunday. I really dig. Yeah. I dig the groove of that. It's
chill. Yeah, Heaven on a Sunday
back and chill and Great Day. I just love the way it closes out, and World Tonight song we were singing. Those are great. And then of course with one song we didn't talk about, which was the little jam session with Ringo.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
You're saving it. All right.
There's a lot here. That's the great thing. So Beautiful Night for me is just like it hits me somewhere. That song, like it's original. Now this song, Beautiful Night, is about 10 years old from the recording of this. He in the mid 80s, McCartney was working on an album called Return to Pepperland, which was going to celebrate 86, like the 20th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper. You can find it on YouTube. I just found it. He did he recorded a version of it, but it's got that 80s reverb and echo, and the lyrics are different, and the arrangement is not there. So I'm glad that he shelved it until he can get George Martin in to do the arranging, because George Martin didn't produce this. He arranged the horns on this.
Yeah.
Jeff Lynne did the production, the guitars. It's a mix of McCartney, Wings, and Beatles. It's got all the different parts of his career in this song. It's got the Sgt. Pepper Penny Lane horns, like the French horns. It's got that blaring horns. It's got the great lush, you said it, like lush arrangements. It's got some roaring guitar at the end. It's got a little bit of everything. And then like you and then but it's not the closing. It should be the closing song on the album, but it's not. Great Day closes it, which is one of the ones you like. And I really kind of correlate this to The Wait on Abbey Road and then Her Majesty. Like you've got The Wait, which is like this, that whole big medley at the end is this big, everything comes to a crescendo. And the album ends, and then there's just this little ditty at the end of Her Majesty on the end of Abbey Road.
That's right.
And this is the same thing. Beautiful Night is this big production. It's this big song. It's the biggest like scope. It's the song that has the biggest scope on the album, right? The biggest production and everything.
Yeah, for the most part, the album's pretty sparse. It's because he didn't want to use a lot of like heavy production on it.
Yeah, he wanted to move quick. And so this song ends, and then you've got this little 2-minute song right after it, Great Day, which is just him on with his acoustic guitar. Again, the arrangement from 25 years previous, he didn't change anything. And him tapping on the guitar and tapping on his knee for percussion. Yeah,
I love that.
Album ends. And I can't help but look at him coming off the anthology and being energized by that. And this maybe having some subliminal influence on Abbey Road of having this big epic song kind of close the album out, but then you have this little gentler song that kind of kind of opens the door for you gently while you're walking out,
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a great, it's just, again, brilliant. Like you would expect Beautiful Night to end the album. It's like, oh my God, this big thing. No, there's, sometimes less is more. And going with that understated song at the end is just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yep. My wife Kelly's a big fan of Calico Skies. She, because when we first met, this album had been in my rotation, as it were, like listening to this CD over and over, and I really dug it, and so I played it for her, and she was, she wasn't much of, that much of a Beatles or Paul McCartney fan, but if there was one album that made her recognize Paul McCartney, it was this one, and she loves Calico Skies for whatever reason. It's a beautiful song, isn't it? No doubt, but it's just
you can't help that it's about his wife. It's like
it is. It's not your everyday run of the mill ballad. It's very sort of British. It's very sort of like proper. And just his voice. It's almost like he's almost trying, like it reminds me of Wings when he does all those weird voices, and when with Wings, him and Linda, they used to do like that stuff, and that it kind of reminds me of that. It's like this really prim and proper, like type of thing, and it's just very, and it's amazing that she just of all the things to like, and especially in the 90s, with grunge around, like this is it. This is the song you like best, and it's like, I'm like, it just blew my mind. It was just so good, so great.
Ringo Starr would make an appearance on this album. He would be on 3 songs. Only 2 would be on the album. Beautiful Night, which Ringo would play drums on. So once they finished that session for Beautiful Night, and Ringo was so jazzed. He showed up the next day at the recording studio. And so Paul grabbed Jeff Lynne and Ringo, and this is the first ever song credited to Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr together, is Really Love You. And it's just it's just 3 people. It's Paul on bass, Jeff Lynne on guitar, and then Ringo on drums. And then Paul would go and do some overdubs later. Ringo just started laying down a beat. Paul McCartney started playing a bass line. Jeff Lynne said, I'm just going to try and keep up with the guitar. I'm just going to I'm not going to get in the way. And then Paul McCartney just started making up lyrics. The lyrics are not, it's like one of those jams that people would just kind of do, and that song is probably the spirit, embodies the spirit of what he was trying to do. I think that's why it's on this album, because it's so freewheeling, unrehearsed. It was done live in the studio like that. It's very on anything.
You needed something like that. You needed to have that little bit in there, just to, again, like the anthology, to have that creative piece where it's almost like a behind the scenes type of take, or like something
almost like this would be like an outtake or a warm up.
Exactly. And
Right?
it also would make a really strong case for, going back to our bass player episode
Yeah.
when you made such a case about his bass playing. And this song, that heavy bass line it's very simple, but it's like that thick bass that he uses is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And such a great sound.
Really, so it's just like, he was, the guy's done it all, right? So it's kind of like we've done we did the Thriller episode, and I'm going to refer back to our In Excess episode, where those artists went in with the expressed intent of making every song that it could be a single. It could be a number one single, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does a guy do when he's done all that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you keep yourself interested? Right? He's been there. He's done that. He's got the awards. He's got the accolades. He's the greatest thing on earth. Like, then what does he do? Like, at what point? So what tickled his fancy was working quickly and getting the spark back from 97. So you're talking like 25 years early, 1962, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going back 25 years more than that, 35 years, sorry. To get the spark back from after spending all that time reflecting on his time with the Beatles, right? There's no way that didn't influence having Really Love You on there, like the loose jam, the well-produced stuff like Beautiful Night, the introspective stuff like, a lot of those, Calico Skies and Little Willow calls to like Hey Jude, it calls to Yesterday,
mm-hmm.
it calls to his softer stuff. So it's all there. Like it's kind of like, I think it's the most well-realized statement of what he wanted to do. Because those other albums were like Flowers in the Dirt was kind of his comeback, and he worked with Elvis Costello, and Elvis Costello was like positioned as like the John Lennon,
mm-hmm.
Like he was going to, kind of co-write with McCartney, and Elvis Costello's got that cynical edge that Lennon had, and they were kind of positioning that, which was great. It heralded McCartney coming back, and he came back to touring in 89 for the first time since like Wings Over, like since 76 or something like that.
Yeah.
So he was kind of on a comeback trail, and then he put out a lot of live albums after that, and then Off the Ground, which was a great album, but they were just kind of not performing well, and I think that's what he wanted to recapture is I want to get back to putting out something that's really quality, that's kind of really there, by assembling this, getting Steve Miller in, which is a shot, a different kind of shot mm-hmm. that Ringo brings, or it's a different shot that George Martin will bring. George Martin's going to bring the old style arrangements and that old style sensibility, and Jeff Lynne kind of represents the guy that can the architect that can kind of just keep it held together, right? And kind of like I think that's his, I don't think you hear his overt sound on this, because I think he was almost more of like an overseer,
mm-hmm.
And just making sure that things were done right and kept on track, and kind of so more like a Rick Rubin, I think, in this case, because I don't think you're going to push your influence onto Paul McCartney unless he wants it.
Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. No.
As opposed to you listen to Cloud Nine, you hear Jeff all over that, and that's what George wanted, is he wanted a partner. He wanted a real collaborator to kind of come in. And I think Paul was saying, well, this guy's got something that I can use, right, in the right doses.
It's
and that's
I'm
why
really
it's not the heavy-handed.
I'm glad you brought up George Harrison, because
that's
probably
your favorite Beatle.
The one thing that I feel like that he should have been on this record, at least one song. You're going to bring Ringo back. You're just on the heels of the anthology. You kind of made up a little bit. You guys were in really great spirits. Why wasn't he on this record? At least one song. Beautiful Night he could have had both play on that really elaborate track, and George could have offered something.
It would have been nicer if they sang together. It would have been nicer if he just sang. If they just sang together.
That's what I'm saying. Free as a Bird. The absolute the harmonies on that song alone is just some of the finest that I've ever heard. Even back from way back in the day. Maybe he didn't want the full gimmick. Okay. Yeah, but it's just. He could have done something stupid like come up with that anonymous name like he did with Clapton with Cream with Badge. George Harry song. Yeah, it's like some like Mysterioso, like something or other. So he's got a lot of
It
But
got a lot of
he could have pulled something
pseudonyms.
like that, and you wonder what's going through Jeff Lynne's mind at this point. It's like, I wonder if that discussion happened. Why not bring George on? I wonder if Jeff
Probably
Lynne,
not.
said to Paul, "Hey, what about George?" Because
I'm
they were
gonna say
at that
probably
point they
not.
were really, really tight.
Yeah.
So it's hard for. Yeah, and just the spirit of that, and like, just one more shot, just to have them both together and worked with both of them together. And in this case, Jeff actually playing on the track with them.
Yeah.
Whereas like Free as a Bird, I think he was just hanging back and he was
Yeah,
more
it was
or
the
less
Beatles.
producer.
Yeah.
It was the Beatles doing their thing.
Yep.
But here, to have all of them playing together would have been
Close.
Would have been
Came
nice.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an almost there. Yeah, it's just you got to take it, you got to kind of take what you get, and I think that like I said, Paul McCartney using him in the way that he wanted. So it wasn't a full on takeover like it was with Full Moon Fever. Right? That's like a full on, it was like a full on takeover, and Cloud Nine was like a full on takeover, right? Meaning like I want this person for what what they're going to do, and I'm going to give them kind of free reign, to kind of put that in there, but I think at this point at the late 90s, I think after working with the Beatles too, I think Jeff Lynne might have been kind of already past that too, and really getting into a producer role.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not a guy that's going to come in and play bass, guitar, keyboards, and produce and be the he's like the Swiss Army knife, right?
Yeah.
Paul McCartney is already the Swiss Army. He's the bigger Swiss Army knife.
Master. He's a master class of the Swiss Army.
Exactly. Yeah. He's got like 52 blades. Jeff Lynne has like 37 blades or whatever. You don't really need, Paul McCartney doesn't need that, and he did most of that already himself. So he just needed that.
That's right.
That guidance and that ear, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's kind of it was an interesting dynamic, and I think that's probably why. I think he also has to realize, I'm being hired to do this, so I'm not really I don't think he's going to stir the pot by saying, "Hey, how come George isn't here?" Like, all right, there's the door. he said the wrong word.
Name again. Get out.
So it's just this is again, and Linda McCartney is on I think only one song. I think she only sings on, and her for someone who's as much maligned, not as much as Yoko Ono was with John Lennon, but Linda McCartney got her fair share of grief for being inducted as a member of Wings, right? Like a full-on member of Wings. She would get songwriting credits, and the record company back in the 70s was like, you know what, you're like to Paul McCartney, like, you're trying to screw us because you're getting songwriting credit, she's getting songwriting credit, so that you're getting double credits, and she's doesn't, what does she really contribute? Like, they're really questioning that. Does she really play keyboards? Can she really sing? Who cares? If he wanted her there, if that made him a better artist, and he seemed to be a happy person, and they had the longest marriage, right? John Lennon was married and divorced in the 60s. Ringo Starr was done in the early 70s. They were already on their second wives. George Harrison was done, with Patty Boyd. He was already on his second marriage. So Paul McCartney had the longest standing relationship with anybody. So that was his partner, and I think there was a change after this because he's been married twice since her passing. So, I think that left a hole. And when you listen to this album, I try not to think about it, because when you do, it really it casts everything in a different light. And if you want to be in that mood, you can. It can have that melancholy, like Beautiful Night can be a melancholy song when you look at it from the standpoint of his partner's only got a limited amount of time, and they know that, they knew this. And all these other songs take on a different kind of color. But you try not, I try to listen to it from the musical standpoint and enjoy each song as it is,
Well, you have to.
It's so great.
You have to. I mean, even sad songs to me, I mean, can be great. I mean, it's not so much it doesn't bring me down in that sense, because the music, it could just live. It's uplifting.
That was,
what I'm saying?
Doesn't bring me down.
Don't bring me down. Okay.
Come on, you knew
But
that.
you know what I'm saying? Like even the saddest song, if the music's right, it touches your soul. So
Yeah.
it's already lifting your spirits anyway. A beautiful song. Most songs are the best songs are sad. You know, like you said before, like it's hard to write a happy song without it sounding like a happy song, like really cheesy or poppy. You know, those are the songs that get
that's why you wrote silly love songs, right?
right. Those are the songs that get criticized. Those are the ones that nobody likes, and like critics, like you know, that's stuff. But you
Goes
know,
McCartney again, Mr. Poppy. You know, like
yeah, right.
but he's so good. He can do it all.
Yeah, but it's he you know, he's good at it. He's
not
really
good at it. He's great. This guy is one of a kind. You know, he really is. To you know. And a lot of times, you know, we're going to go off on just a little, I'm going to go out with a little fan theory. You know, I think, I also think some of the animosity between him and John Lennon, and I could be wrong, but I think there was probably a little jealousy there, you know, because everybody else in the Beatles really struggled with songwriting, like to get the idea, you know, like seemed like they were fighting, and it just seemed to come so naturally. And I think as much as John Lennon criticized McCartney through the 70s, and obviously they were friends, I think there was some envy there, though, that this guy could just do it. Like he does it so easily.
Sure.
And it wasn't all sappy stuff. I mean, he did like Live and Let Die, and he did a lot of harder stuff. And then, he did stuff like, you know, Another Day and you know, Ebony and Ivory, but great. The guy could do it, but he could do it all. Like if he wanted to write a hard song, he'd write a hard song. You know, if he wants to write a love song, he'll write a love song. Like it just seems to come, like he wrote
did Helter Skelter, for God's sake. I mean, you know, that's, you know, that, that's there's your example right there.
The song Young Boy on this album, he wrote that while Linda McCartney was being interviewed for a magazine. Like while she was making lunch, he wrote that song. Like, you know, and if you watch the Get Back documentary, you just see like you see a guy sitting at the piano, and this stuff just comes out. A melody with no words, you know, da 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 da, and then the next time it's Maxwell Silverhammer.
And how do you
know?
And you know, we were very easy to criticize Paul as having the huge ego, and but you know, he does come across as somewhat. I don't think he necessarily realizes that he has a big ego in that sense, because I think he just does what he does, and he just maybe, you know, I can't help it being this talented. I can't help. I mean, this is what I do.
The guy's what, 80? I think he's 80, right?
He's up there.
Since you were 19 or 20, you've been idolized.
Yeah.
Since you were 20 years old. So for the past 60 years, and most people would say your first 10 years were your best, right?
Yeah.
You know, he's done nothing but lived his life under a microscope and in the spotlight. But the guy has delivered. Like you can't.
He pushes himself.
I don't think he's I don't think he's overrated. Like you cannot say like, oh, McCartney, he's overrated. It's like, no, he's good at what he does. He is probably better than anybody at crafting a song, at working within different genres and understanding those things and knowing what, you know, what he like when he does, again, I'm going to go back to the Get Back documentary, like when they're rehearsing and they're goofing around and doing different voices. But when it comes down to laying down the track, he delivers. Like he knows what kind of vocal to use, and you know, he takes that part of it seriously. He has fun doing it, and it's a goof. But when it's time to get down to work, he's serious about it, you know, and he does, and he still he just put out, like in 2020, he put out McCartney 3, his third titled solo album. So he shows no signs of stopping, and he's still touring. He's still like, you know, we didn't even talk about the concert in '89 when we saw him at Madison Square Garden. That was like a jaw-dropping experience for me. That was probably, at the time, I've been to a decent amount of concerts, but that was something on a different level.
Yeah, I agree.
At that point, you know, it was something that we had seen Genesis, we had seen Styx, we had seen, you know, a lot of these groups, but by the time McCartney came around in '89 or '90, whenever it was, and he hadn't toured since the '70s, and he was now embracing, in a big way, doing his Beatles catalog, and replicating it, you know, using samples of of horns, I remember when they did Sergeant Pepper, and the guy, Wicks or whatever his name was playing like the horn parts on the keyboard, and it was the exact sample. My jaw hit the ground. I'm like, I can't believe I'm seeing Paul McCartney sing Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with it sounding authentic. It wasn't like a rock and roll version with like electric guitars. It was like recreating it.
Yeah.
What more do you want?
Yeah, doing it. Eleanor Rigby, songs like Fool on the Hill.
Everything
songs
was just
that ill. Just songs that they were not doing, that hadn't been done.
Yeah.
He did a lot of, like older stuff with Wings in 76.
Jet. I mean, he did like a lot of great. It was just a fantastic concert. But
the Beatles stuff, when they stopped touring, none of that stuff was ever performed.
No, it was never done. So for him to embrace it,
was until this. Yeah. And then from that point on, it seemed like with every new album or every couple of years, he would put out that tour's album. Like he would there would be a document of that particular tour.
Because they were great. The first one was Tripping the Live Fantastic was the live CD of that tour that we saw, which was fantastic. It was just I remember it, just a quick memory about that is before they came on, they had a screen that was down, like a movie screen.
Yep.
And they showed like a video of like the band like standing there, and like Paul McCartney like hit like a bass note. It was like doom doom doom, and then the screen went up, and they were there, like, and he was playing the note, and it was just forget it. It was a joy, because that was like we were in like the height of the like at that point we weren't at the height of our Beatles fandom. We were already like established. Right, so this was like perfect. We had been into the Beatles, digested everything. It was like boom.
By far the best concert experience I've ever been to.
Yeah,
because you couldn't the vibe in the room, such love. I mean, people were dancing in the aisles. This wasn't like nobody was throwing bottles. Nobody was, sit down. Like you go to every concert. There's always an asshole, some guy like ruining. But nobody was like. Everybody was. I see people. I'm looking around. People are crying. They're just because again I guess they had to turn up the lights a little bit to see them. But when you look down and Madison Square and you see people dancing in the aisles. And sitting there and just in awe of this man.
I was speechless. I went 2 nights in a row.
Yeah.
And I was speechless. It was almost like a life-changing.
You got tickets for, gave me tickets for my birthday. I remember. And I was,
you never paid me back for those tickets. I said it was a loaner birthday gift.
I took off work, to go see the show. And all I had to say was, when I asked my boss at the time, hey, is it okay if I, and all I had to say was Paul McCartney, and she just lit up, and she was, you got to go. Of course you can have it.
You don't ask your boss. You tell your boss, I'm going to Paul McCartney. Someone else can do whatever I do for one day. I'm going to Paul McCartney.
But and I'm glad that I had only seen him once, because
me too. I've only ever seen him that time.
I don't think I could have gone back, and it's just one, that's enough for me. I got to see this.
He started doing stadiums after that, so everything got bigger.
Of course,
the venues got, then he started doing giant stadium and I hate stadium shows.
So do I,
because even Madison Square Garden's a big venue, but it can still be intimate. It's an enclosed. It's
right.
It's there, but when you get to the stadiums and it's open and the guy, you're on the other side of the field, and the person looks like a Lego guy. You can't even see who it is. That's more of like a hang when you go.
And that was the cool thing too. You talk to like some people who are a little bit younger than we are, and then the best concert I ever went to was this, and yes, but I saw Paul McCartney, and they're like, okay,
and still in his prime.
But
40,
and that was
80. Yeah, he was in his late 40s, so he wasn't even 50 yet. So we kind of saw him when he was
young, he was vital.
Yeah, you might have thought he was over the hill at that point, but he really wasn't, considering that he's still going now. It's like we saw him in the 80s,
and he still looks great. He's starting to show his age, but of course, he still looks good. Though,
he'll attribute it to veganism, right? He's a staunch veganism, but he's a staunch supporter of the devil's lettuce as well. He spent some time in jail in Japan, and I don't know if you remember that. And it was at the late 70s or early 80s, like a big thing. It was like on the news, like the Paul McCartney in jail, like in Japan in jail watch, like day 10, Paul McCartney in jail in Japan, and he was never. I guess they let him back in, or was he still banned? Because at the time they got think so. For marijuana. They like back then it was like a big thing, and they kicked him out of the country. But I'm sure I think he's been back. They should lift that, But he was a big purveyor of, wasn't big into the psychedelics like the LSD and stuff. It
was always the cannabis,
But always the weed was like his thing. Yep. So hey, if there's a connection, we got some catching up to do so we can be on the level of him and his musical prowess. I don't know if there's enough time to catch up,
right? Goodness.
So closing out, I'm gonna say that Calico Skies might be your favorite. I'm gonna say that's probably the highlights for you.
That's not my favorite. It's my wife's favorite. It's Kelly's favorite, but my favorite song, "Heaven on a Sunday."
Heaven on a Sunday. That's
my favorite. So that's my favorite track. But I mean,
it's like
the entire album's great, but
yeah, it's like a song. That's like a song like in the spring, you wake up, it's kind of cool out, and the sun is out, and it's just like it's such a chill, just a great. Yeah, it's a great song.
Yeah,
it's a great song. I'm gonna go with obviously with Beautiful Night. It's just I love that. It used to be bad. Again, that's a nice little rave up with Mr. Steve Miller. Again, we really Jeff Lynne the hell out of this episode. But we gotta give some
Great Day is another one too.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's probably what you meant when you said Calico Skies. Maybe you meant Great Day.
No, I was thinking Calico Skies, but that was because of your wife.
Great Day. Great Day are my two favorites from the.
Yeah. Yep. And then again, he would kind of not really hit, what he would hit again. I mean, he wouldn't have another studio album until Driving Rain in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had that side group, the Firemen, which was kind of like a little avant-garde thing, but he wouldn't hit again. And that album, Driving Rain, number 26. So, he got his number 2 for the 90s with this one, right? I said in the beginning, he's the only artist that has 6 decades of a number 1 or number 2 album. This is the one that did it for him. This kept the streak going in the 90s because it was pretty dry up until then. So good on him for doing it. And yeah, just check this out. It's on Spotify. It's remastered.
Mm-hmm.
There was a box set, a lot of extra stuff, but
all that stuff is on there. Yeah.
I think just listen to the album.
I was disappointed because I'm looking at this thing and they're talking about all these extra tracks that didn't appear on the album and none of it's in the box set, which is, odd.
It's because they just talked about it. They just wanted to let you know.
Yeah.
It's for informational purposes
remixes.
Only.
They got like 7 or 8 remixes of one song. And that's the stuff I can't stand. I want the B-sides. I want the extra tracks because some of them could be gems. You never know, so. But by the way, I have to add that if you haven't listened to the remix of the new mix of Revolver, it's fantastic. It just came out on Friday.
As of the
perfect,
of this,
it is absolutely perfect. I couldn't be happier with the.
It's almost overkill with the amount of stuff that's on there. I was looking at the track listings. I'm like, my god.
But there's some good stuff. And of course they have Rain on there and,
stereo mix,
paperback writer, both in mono and stereo, the entire album, both in mono. But the mix on this thing is great. The bottom end is what I was looking for. And I got it. Finally got it. It's well balanced. He did such a great job with this one. I was hoping that this would be the one that
Giles Martin.
Yeah. So
cool. I'll have to check that out. And that's on streaming as well. So check that out. And then you have, of course, Flaming Pie from 1997. To sum up, someone that was they probably thought was on the other side of their career, going by the previous few albums that really weren't. They were okay, critically, and really weren't hitting. And then he just kind of pulled it together, energized by his old group. Who would have thought that it would take the Beatles to re-energize him to really kind of put the pedal to the metal and surround himself with people that he wanted to work with and that he would have fun with and could work quickly. And out of the oven came a Flaming Pie. So
Yeah. Very well put.
Right? You like this?
I love that. Yeah, it was
those
great.
puns just come. They come rolling off. So that's my superpower.
Yep.
That's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this one. Join us on social media, won't you? Instagram and Facebook. It's a lot of fun there. And on Facebook and YouTube, we do live shows every other week. Sometimes we throw in trivia nights too, which is a lot of fun. But either way, it's your chance to interact with us and have a blast. And we really enjoy interacting with our community. So we encourage you to seek us out on the socials, and we would love to interact with you. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.